Willowherbs are among the most eye-catching of summer wildflowers, or at least two of them are. We have about a dozen Irish species out of something like 200 willowherb species worldwide, in a family that also includes enchanters nightshade, evening primrose and, surprisingly perhaps, fuchsia. But only two of our species are tall and really imposing, both in fact often well over 2 meters in height. And they can often occur in extensive stands because they spread rapidly by means of their fleshy creeping rhizomes. This is great willowherb, which prefers wetter situations. It's very typically growing beside streams or along the edges of lakes, or where the ground is damp or marshy, such as it is here, for example. Rosebay, the other species which we looked at in an earlier season, in fact, prefers drier situations, and it flowers somewhat earlier. It's at its best in July, whereas great willowherb is at its best in August. Unlike the tall spires of rosebay, great willowherb is a many-branched plant, each branch a short raceme. A raceme is like a spike in floral terminology, except that the individual flowers along the axis have stalks. The flowers have 4 sepals and 4 petals, 4 stamens, and a very long inferior ovary. The stamens and carpels mature at the same time, unlike the elaborate protandrous floral ballet of rosebay, but the 4-lobed stigma rises high above the stamens, making self-pollination unlikely at first. Bees are regular visitors, but if no insects arrive, the 4 lobes curl back to pick up its own pollen, producing abundant seed. One important trend in floral evolution is the development of what in botanical terms is referred to as an inferior ovary, which sounds like a contradiction to refer to something that has evolved from a simpler condition as being inferior. But the word refers specifically to the position of the ovary, which is beneath the other organs of the flower. In other words, it's inferior in that strictly positional sense. The purpose or the reason behind this trend in evolution is that it moves the ovary, which is the most important part of the flower, to a more sheltered and protected position beneath the other floral organs. The Latin name of the willowherb genus actually celebrates this prominent characteristic. Willowherbs are epilobium species. Epi meaning upon in Greek, and lobos, a pod. And the ovary is the most marvellous thing. It contains numerous tiny seeds, each with a fluffy plume of the finest silk. And yet the plumes are so arranged that when the 4 valves of the ripe seed case split open, there isn't the slightest degree of tangling of hairs between the seeds unless it rains, and rain is something they avoid. Great willowherb, or great hairy willowherb, is appropriately named in Latin as well as in English. The scientific name for the species is Epilobium hirsutum, hirsutum meaning hairy in Latin. The stems and leaves are densely covered with hairs, which may discourage larger grazers, but several moths feed on the leaves of willowherbs, the most striking being the elephant hawk moth, which often turns up in moth traps. An interesting detail about the elephant hawk moth is that it was the first species in which nocturnal colour vision in insects was documented. But striking as the adult is, the caterpillar is even more so, and it's the supposed resemblance of the caterpillar to an elephant's trunk that gives the moth its name. When threatened, the caterpillar retracts its head and puffs out its body, which makes the prominent eye spots on the body more prominent still, and gives it a somewhat snake-like appearance. The caterpillar of the elephant hawk moth is secretive and surprisingly difficult to spot when it's feeding on its willowherb host. But when it's fully grown, it leaves the plant, goes down onto the ground and walks away in search of a place to pupate and to spend the winter. And your best chance of one crossing your path, if you are an inexperienced phelinophile, as most of us are, is just that, literally. If you keep your eyes open sometimes, you can actually see the caterpillar walking along the path in front of you if you yourself are out walking in a place where there is abundant willow herb.